I live! Welcome, everyone. It's me, your favorite unprofessional game reviewer, Trashenstein. Today, we will review the second generation of Pokemon games in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. I did not play Crystal for this review, but I have played it before. With all that being said, let us begin, shall we? In Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, you play as a boy, or girl alternatively if it's Crystal, going on a journey throughout the Johto region to catch and battle Pokemon. The goal hasn't really changed much since the first generation. Beat the gym leaders, beat the Elite Four, and finally beat the champion. You also have a new dickhead rival to deal with, as well as Team Rocket, returning from the first games with a new goal in mind. Upon beating the champion, you can then revisit Kanto, rebattle old gym leaders, and have the final battle of the game. Development of Gold and Silver started after the release of the first games in 1996. Gold and Silver were meant to be released in 1997, but development issues and desire to appease fans led the games to be postponed. Pokemon Yellow came out in their place instead. Another reason for the delay was because Pokemon's creator, Satoshi Tajiri, stepped aside from directing, letting Junichi Masuda, a game composer for Pokemon, take the helm for Gold and Silver's development instead. Pokemon Stadium's development, as well as localization for the first Pokemon games, also caused additional delays. Nintendo actually issued an apology, where they claimed that the developers were worn out but fully committed to the project, and required more time for development. All of these delays caused Pokemon Gold and Silver to then be released in 1999. Also, 1 year later, Pokemon Crystal was released, with some minor additions. I think the music in these games are solid. It does sound similar to the previous generation, but I'm pretty sure that can be partially blamed on having to work with limited and similar hardware. I should mention that I don't know much about what makes music good. I basically just listen to every theme in the soundtrack once or multiple times and then give them a score between 0 and 10. Anyway, some examples of music I really liked were the battle theme for Team Rocket, as well as the Goldenrod Game Corner. Yeah, baby! Ooh, Ochi mama! This theme is so energetic and happy for some reason, and I love it! But I don't love all of them. Like Dragon's Den and the new theme for Rock Tunnel. I find them unpleasant and annoying. The graphics have received an upgrade compared to the first generation. Since these games were intended for a more graphically impressive console, the Game Boy Color, the world and sprites could now come in more color instead of 2 shades of gray or the same color. Other than that, the graphics are pretty similar to the first generation. Simple, yet charming. In this generation, we got 100 new Pokemon. Some of them were new evolutions of old Pokemon, like baby forms, alternative evolutions, or stronger evolutions. The last one was a fine addition, as it means Pokemon that were the strongest can now evolve and get an opportunity to be used. These games also started using legendary Pokemon on the box. For Gold and Silver, we have Ho-Oh and Lugia. I'm personally more of a fan of Ho-Oh. Lugia has a pretty cool design, but when you take in factors such as playing Gold before Silver, Ho-Oh's ties to the legendary beast, which we'll get into later, and me having neither watched the movie or played XD, you could see how I would prefer the cool rainbow bird over the sea dragon thing. Plus, I like more colorful Pokemon. Despite all that though, they don't really do much in-game since, well, they're not really forced upon you like legendaries in later generations. This is a good thing in terms of player choice, but not that good for making these Pokemon seem as important to me. As for Crystal, Suicune was chosen, most likely because of that thing on its forehead. Speaking of Suicune, It and the other two beasts definitely had more attention given to them compared to the birds of the generation before. According to legend, and not some confusing half-scientific, half-mythical claim, and also episode 6 of Pokemon Generations, about 150 years ago in Ekritik City, lightning struck the brass tower, resulting in a fire. It was later put out by a huge downpour, but the rain could not save the 3 Pokemon present in the tower, who perished by the flames. However, as the sun rose, a big bird named Ho-Oh revived the 3 Pokemon back to life as Suicune, Raikou, and Entei. Epic. Regarding the rest of the Pokemon, I like most of them. Pichu's design doesn't appeal to me personally. I wish it looked more like the scrapped beta version, who I could either love endearingly or kick like a soccer ball. Chikorita's design I don't care much for either, wish it looked more like its later stages. Kulava to me looks like a kid trying to be cool, does not succeed. Smeargle I think looks lame, maybe if it had a mustache like some artists I would have liked it more. As for Lantern, though cute, I find its body shape awkward and not a great transition from Chinchou. I would have liked something more like this. I'm not the best artist, by the way. I also think Sunflora has a very boring design, which could have been a little more interesting. Also, though it's not really the most clever thing in the world, I think it could have also been a grass-fire type as well. Lastly, we have the Pokemon that disappointed me the most. Unknown. From a lore standpoint, Unknowns are very interesting. They're weird and ancient Pokemon who reside in another dimension and can seemingly bend reality when in groups. In the movies and TV shows, Unknown had the ability to bring forth people's desires, whether it's creating a fake Entei or bringing about an endless night. So with all of this cool shit in mind, why is it so bad from a gameplay standpoint? Its stats are horrendous, and it only knows one move, Hidden Power, which, while not the most useless move in Pokemon, isn't some insane move that defeats every Pokemon in like one turn. Also, your reward for capturing all 26 Unknown is the ability to print them out with the Game Boy printer. This is very lame. I propose a solution that solves both of these problems. Alright, so here's my plan, right? Somewhere in the ruins of Alph, there is to be a room with 26, or 28 if it's after Generation 3, pedestals, one for each unknown. After placing all unique unknowns on each pedestal, much like letters forming words, they all merge together into a new Pokemon that you then have to fight and capture. I call it All Known. With all the effort needed to get All Known, I think it should have like at least pseudo-legendary stats and a decent move pool. Now, I kinda wanted to go for something more abstract with Unknown, but if they want something that's a little more marketable, they could have gone for something more like this. Hire me, please. Alright, time to get into plot and characters. Starting with Silver, as he's canonically called, takes the helm of this generation's main rival. Much like Blue, he's an asshole, but unlike Blue, is clearly fine with getting his hands dirty, as he steals his starter Pokemon and even hits the player. He is told by people around him to treat his Pokemon kinder, which he disregards as he's only out for strong Pokemon. However, once he was beaten by a certain caped trainer, he starts to wonder if maybe the reason he keeps losing is because he doesn't give his Pokemon enough respect. This can be seen later in the game when his Golbat, who can only evolve via friendship, evolves into Crobat. And by later, I mean in the post-game. Yeah, it's kinda lame how you don't get to see his transformation as a trainer before the post-game, It doesn't help that his final pre-post game battle is so disappointing. Awful move pulls combined with unevolved and weak Pokémon makes his team a cakewalk. Plus, sharing similar Pokémon with Blue gives Silver less of his own identity. Blue was also more satisfying to beat in my opinion, since he was the final battle of that adventure. Okay, so here's my solution for Silver. First, his Magnemite, Sneasel, and Abra will be replaced with Eevee, later Umbreon, to further his arc for friendship, Mankey, later Primeape, because both Silver and Mankey are aggressive, and lastly Scyther, later Scizor. The last one doesn't have the best reasonings for being on his team, but Scizor is red, much like Silver's hair, and having a steel type would be great for his team. Secondly, you move back Silver's final two battles, the ones that taught him to respect his Pokémon. They are to instead take place to when he mentions Lance for the first time, and when you fight him in the Goldenrod Underground. Then you give him one extra battle, taking place of the original one at Victory Road. For and with this extra fight, his team will be fully evolved with improved move pulls, better ties to his arc, and more unique Pokémon compared to Blue. As for his post-game battles, they could just be higher leveled with slightly better move pulls. Besides your rival, you also have the professors. I didn't really talk much about Professor Oak last time, so I'll touch on him here. Oak is the first character you see in both games where he introduces you to the world of Pokémon, asks for your name, and then throws you into your bedroom. He also gives you the Pokédex and congratulates you when you beat the champion in both generations. In Gen 1, he is also responsible for giving you your first Pokémon. I definitely found him more active in the player's journey compared to the new Professor Elm. Though he calls you every once in a while, I didn't really feel like he did much else besides giving you your starter. Perhaps he could have introduced you to the world of Pokémon, or have been the one to congratulate you on your champion victory, or something. Side note, just for funsies, maybe Elm could have had an optional battle based on his specialization in Pokémon breeding and eggs. By having Pokémon related to his studies, I think it would show that he's interested in his specialty and would make him stand out from Oak a little. Post-Professors, we also have this generation's champion, Lance, the Dragon Master. Returning from Generation 1, he is now upgraded from Elite 4 member to Champion. Now, it's very cool to see him return, but if I didn't know about Lance before, he probably wouldn't have had much of an impact on me. Also, you don't really interact much with Lance in this game, only a little near the Lake of Rage and the Rocket HQ. He does also set up Silver's change as a trainer, but besides that, I feel like Lance is mostly held up by the fact that he was in the previous games as a strong trainer. Regarding his team, I think it's fine. His Pokémon could definitely have better move pulls and held items, but whatever. I also think his team could have Tyranitar on it. It's dragony enough and makes his team less weak to ice. That and no other trainer really used Tyranitar from what I could remember. Perhaps his team could also use one more dragon Pokémon not weak to ice. Before we get to Team Rocket, I want to talk about Eusine, your new Suicune obsessed rival, I think, introduced in Crystal. I don't really care for Eusine. I find his character uninteresting, boring, and disappointing. Like I said, he's incredibly interested in Suicune and intends on capturing it. A goal that, according to Bulbapedia, he's been going at for 10 years. If this is the case, then why is this his team? His Haunter is optimized for Suicune. Being faster than Suicune, it can use Hypnosis to put it to sleep and then use Mean Look to make it harder for it to escape. But Drowsy is slower than Suicune and has no Mean Look, and Electrode... Why are you here? I am not impressed. If this man wants to capture Suicune, then I think his team should be different. First change, More Pokemon with sleep moves that is also faster than, resistant to, and or super effective against Suicune. Secondly, I will change his Haunter into a Smoochum later Jinx, as this gives him more unique Pokemon compared to Silver, fulfills the 2 previous criteria, and keeps the Sleep and Mean Look combo. Lastly, we will have a fast Pokemon with the move False Swipe, a move good for capturing Pokemon. I'm thinking Scyther, who will not evolve as its base stat total is the same as Scizor, and keeping it unevolved makes Eusine more distinct from my altered Silver. I also think he can have more than one battle scattered across Crystal. Perhaps his final battle could be before you battle Suicune. Lastly, we have Team Rocket. Now without their precious leader Giovanni, do they still hold a candle to their shenanigans in Generation 1? No, I don't think so. I think my problem stems from the new leaders just not really living up to the expectations that Giovanni set. Firstly, they don't even have names in this generation. Hard to feel their leaderly presence when all you can refer to them by is Rocket Executive. Besides that, the fact that there's 4 executives instead of 1 makes them feel lesser than Giovanni. Like they need 4 executives in order to make up for 1 Giovanni. I guess it makes sense that they're less competent than Giovanni, but I still think it's lame. I do think them wanting Giovanni to return is a decent motivation for their actions. But I digress. I also think the male executives are kinda lame, both in design but also in that there are 3 of them and they look exactly the same. In this generation, they look like upset teenage boys whose mom forced them to dress nicely. The female executive by comparison has more of a presence, thanks to there only being 1 and that she strikes a pose in her sprites. Lastly, they have very unimpressive teams. Granted, this is a problem that I think the entire game has, but we'll get more into that later. The final executive that you battle has 2 non-fully evolved Pokemon and a Houndoom. What kind of team is this? You almost make Eusine look good. Of where you are in the game, I think they're at least deserving of 5 Pokemon. Alright, here's what I want. For Gold, Silver, and Crystal, I think they should make the 1 unique executive be the leader, and then have the remaining executives be like her second in command. This will make me take this Giovanni-less Team Rocket more seriously, as now they have a leader who is competent enough. However, I will still have them yearn for Giovanni's return, since I think it makes sense that Team Rocket themselves would feel incomplete without him. The final battle with this new head executive will also be harder, plus she will have more appearances in the game. The original head executive, quote unquote, only showed up once, which I think is very lame. My opinions on Johto's settlements are that I feel like there isn't anything too crazy to set it apart from Kanto. This might be because the graphics are similar besides the color, but what do I know? Johto also has similar settlements to Kanto, like a harbor city, city with a game corner and big store, and island. Johto does have some unique places though. Violet City has a big tower worshipping the holy Pokemon Bellsprout. Blackthorn, I think, is the first mountain-based city, and of course, the heart of Johto, Cherry Grove. Just kidding, you fool. Ecruteak City. The stories of the legendary beasts take place here, as well as where you find said beasts, before they run away. And you also find their supposed savior here, Ho-Oh, once the Rainbow Wing has been obtained. As for the routes, most of them are once again kinda just grass, with the road again, with a few water routes too. The non-route paths I think are better this time around, as more of them have unique and interesting little things about them. We have Ilex Forest, though pretty much just a forest, seen that before, has the Celebi Shrine. Then you also have the Ruins of Alph, a nice piece of world building, whose main Pokemon could have been better, and who can forget the Lake of Rage?
First of all, rad name. Secondly, legend has it that the lake was created after a bunch of Gyarados stirred up a storm. This caused a crater that was later filled with rainwater, thus resulting in the Lake of Rage. Neat lore. We of course also have Whirl Islands, an optional dungeon where Lugia dwells, a place that did not get any interesting lore until the remake, so I won't touch on them here. But of course, we can't forget the most interesting thing about Generation 2's world. You can return to Kanto in the post-game. This is such a cool thing they added that they never really did again. Kanto, of course, has been made smaller, I think to make sure that there was enough space in the cartridge. Areas such as Viridian Forest, Mount Moon, Cerulean Cave, Seafoam Islands, and the Safari Zone were either removed or made significantly smaller. It's still cool though, and that you can battle old gym leaders here, mwah! A very good. The gameplay is essentially the same as the first game, but I still think it's fun. I also still enjoy the tons of possible party members, as well as the rock, paper, scissors type of battling. The option to come up with fun strategies is still there, and has been expanded upon with the addition of new types, weather, and held items, all of which I'll get into later. However, there were some new additions and improvements from the first games, starting with... In this generation, shiny Pokémon were introduced, where there is a 1 in 8,192 chance that a Pokémon will appear with stars and a different color scheme. I myself don't really care much for shiny hunting. Spending hours or days towards finding a differently colored Pokémon doesn't sound that appealing to me. That's not to say I feel nothing from it. When I do see a shiny, I'm like, what the hell? Oh shit, a shiny. And not so much the oh my god! The bag got significantly bigger, as well as being organized into 4 sections: balls, TMs and HMs, key items, and items, aka the rest. While the bag is still limited in space, this is certainly an improvement from the first game's bag. You still also have the PC for extra storage, which I do appreciate. Gold and Silver introduced the Pokégear, or in other words, a phone. It can tell the time, show the map of Johto and Kanto, allow you to listen to the radio, and you can call people with it. The phone allows certain characters and other NPCs to call you about certain things, like outbreaks of rare Pokémon or rematches. They also give away evolutionary stones, but only in crystal. However, people can also call you in the middle of your adventure, which can be kind of annoying. By the way, if you're in the ruins of Alph and you have the radio at channel 13.5, you'll hear this creepy transmission, potentially the unknowns communicating with each other. How weird, how strange, how creepypasta-worthy. This generation introduced a new battle effect in the form of weather: harsh sunlight, rain, and sandstorm. Harsh sunlight makes fire-type moves 50% stronger, halves the damage of water-type moves, and makes moves such as Morning Sun, Synthesis, and Moonlight heal more HP. It also makes Solar Beam not require a charge turn, as well as dropping Thunder's accuracy. Rain is essentially the opposite. Water-type attacks increase by 50%, fire attacks and Solar Beam deal half their usual damage, those healing moves will heal less HP, and Thunder will always hit its target. Lastly, we have Sandstorm that works a little differently. Though it halves the 3 healing moves like Rain, it does not boost any damage or accuracy, and instead deals 1/8 of damage to any Pokémon that is in Ground, Rock, or Steel type. I am personally disappointed that there weren't really any trainers that took full advantage of weather, but I'll bring up my solution to that later. Generation 2 added the concept of time into Pokémon. where, depending on the current day and time set by the player, different things will happen. Depending on the day, certain trainers can be battled for a rematch, you might get a held item by specific NPCs, a Lapras can be fought and caught in Union Cave, if it's Friday, and many other things can happen as well. The time of day, meanwhile, affects which Pokémon will currently appear in the wild, and, for certain Pokémon, what they will evolve into. I think this is a neat way to make the world of Pokémon feel a little more real. I suppose one could further expand upon this time concept, like, what if the time of day affected battles, sorta like the weather mechanic? Moonlight already heals more HP if it's night, so perhaps night could also boost dark-type moves by 50% and upgrade moves relating to night. Morning also already boosts a healing move, Morning Sun, and could additionally boost psychic-type moves, plus moves relating to mornings. I suppose there could also be moves that create a fake night or morning as an in-battle effect. The first generation special stat has been split into special attack and special defense. Now the special stats are on more equal footing with the physical stats. The split did, however, alter some Pokémon stats, where the combined special stats were either higher or lower than their previous special stat, and some, in practice, didn't change at all. Something I forgot to talk about in the previous video, TMs, or technical machines. They can be used to teach moves to Pokémon that they normally wouldn't learn, assuming the TM is compatible. This is very neat and allows for further potential fun with coming up with strategies and team customization. It is a shame that you can only use a TM once before it destroys itself though, and for a lot of them, there's only one with a specific move in the entire game. So use them wisely. Yet another layer of battles was introduced in Gen 2, held items. By giving your Pokémon an item, certain bonuses would occur, such as moves of a certain type increasing in damage, an increased chance for critical hits or flinching, or recovering a little HP every turn. There are also berries, which when held or used from the bag can do a variety of effects. With these held items and berries, the player can now make their Pokémon even better and is fun for strategies. For example, certain berries, namely the Mint and Miracle Berry, can be used in combination with the move Rest to fully heal and cure a Pokémon of status ailments. Now, you could just use a full restore, but as someone that usually refrains from using items, I find this combo very fun. And I wish there were more move and item combos in this generation. Unfortunately, important trainers didn't really use held items, which is a shame and I think is kind of boring. It certainly doesn't disprove my argument from the last video about the player having several advantages over the other NPCs. Move descriptions were added so that once you get a new move, you can see how much power it has, its typing, and what it does. Sadly, you can't see these descriptions when you level up and get the option for a new move, which is very stupid. When leaving New Bark after Professor Elm got robbed, an NPC walks up to you and asks if you know how to capture Pokémon. Here you can answer either yes or no, depending on whether or not you know. This may not seem like a big deal, but with later generation forcing tutorials upon you, I do think it's worth pointing out. Another tutorial that was optional was the building tutorial. You know, the one where an NPC talks about how this is a Pokémon Center and this is a Pokémart. The daycare is something that was introduced in Generation 1, a convenient place where you can leave a Pokémon to gain experience for every step taken, potentially leveling up without battling. In these games, however, not only can you put in 2 Pokémon instead of 1, but it's also possible that the 2 Pokémon may produce an egg if they are the opposite gender and belong in the same egg group. Now, this may not sound like much, but since breeding is based on egg groups and not species, like in the real world, it is possible that the Pokémon can inherit moves from the father, which is not usually found on the mother species. Granted, if you just want to breed to fill up the Pokédex, then you can just breed a Ditto with whatever Pokémon you want the previous evolution of. It does take some time for you to get an egg, however, first having to wait for the egg to come into existence and then having to hatch it by walking about. In these games, your mom can take some of the money you earned and save it for you. This is convenience, but your mom will also buy things using your saved money after reaching certain amounts of savings. One of these items I think is good, the Moonstone, which would allow you to evolve certain Pokémon. After that though, unless you're a completionist that really wants that Snorlax plush, I don't really see much of a reason to have mom save your money. Though if you're perhaps not the best trainer, then I do highly recommend your mom saving your money. This is because you still lose half of all your money in your pocket if you black out, and if that happens often, having savings would be very useful. Mom also doesn't really spend too much money either, in my opinion. Similar to Pikachu in Yellow, when doing certain things with your Pokémon, their newly added friendship stat will increase. This doesn't really do much in terms of gameplay though, it only changes the power of the move's return and frustration, and makes certain Pokémon evolve after level up. But I mean, I wouldn't call it a bad addition. The moves that were either necessary or really beneficial for navigation, aka HMs, had some improvements. Now you can actually delete these moves via the move deleter, giving your Pokémon a chance to have a more useful move pool. There is unfortunately no way to relearn old moves, but hey, we made some progress. While deletion is obviously great, you now also have 2 new HMs. Whirlpool to cross whirlpools, and Waterfall, which used to be Seeking's signature move to go up waterfalls. This means you're gonna have to put more moves on your Pokémon. By the way, why did both of them have to be water type? Whirlpool can be used for stalling and trapping, whatever, okay, sure. But I personally see no reason to use Waterfall over Surf in this generation. Waterfall does have a chance to cause flinching, but Surf has significantly higher power. If they were gonna add new HMs, couldn't they have used other types? A Steel type move about compacting a big piece of metal, or a Bug type move about eating up a big glob of honey. I just think it would be better for the sake of variety. Most likely to nerf the Psychic type, 2 new types were added, the Dark and Steel type. The Dark type deals super effective damage to Psychic types and is immune to their moves. The Steel type, meanwhile, is only resistant to Psychic moves, but is also resistant to most types in the game, making it the best defensive typing. When it comes to the availability of these Pokémon, it could have been a little better. In Gold and Silver, you can only have 1 Dark type before the postgame, Umbreon, and out of the 5 fully evolved Steel types, only 3 of them are available without trading. In Silver and Crystal, for Gold, Skarmory is unavailable, meaning your only options are Magneton and Forretress. Back to Dark types, I know Sneasel was made available in Crystal before the postgame, but that doesn't really matter since Sneasel is a physical attacker, whilst Dark is a special type. This means Dark type moves will only use Sneasel's pitiful special attack stat. The Dark type should have probably been a physical type, so every Dark type added would have benefited from that typing. Moving on though, I think Poison and Dragon, plus Ghost and Bug to some extent, finally got some good moves. Poison got Sludge Bomb and Dragon got Outrage and Dragon Breath. Ghost did get Shadow Ball, but Ghost is still a physical type and all Ghost types are special attackers. and Bug did get Mega Horn, but by Bug, I mean Heracross. One Pokémon. Still though, improvements were made. That I cannot deny. A neat little addition was being able to use key items from your inventory much quicker. After selecting it from your bag and pressing select in the overworld, you can instantly use items like the bike or fishing rods. Like I said in the world section, you're able to go back to Kanto upon beating the champion, where you can rebattle old gym leaders among other things. In my opinion, having an actual post-game makes these games more impressive and better than the first ones. Granted, I do have some gripes. The gym leaders, I feel like, should have had more Pokémon, as I think it's lame to go from lands with 6 Pokémon down to 5, 4, even 3 with some of the gym leaders. Though the gym leaders may not have had the best teams, something else did make up for it. The final boss of Generation 2, Red, the previous protagonist of the first games. Red is the most powerful trainer in the game, largely thanks to him having stupidly high-level Pokémon. His lowest level Pokémon is 15 levels higher than the highest level Pokémon of the game's second strongest trainer, Blue, who took over the Viridian Gym after Giovanni's disappearance. Red's team is basically a perfect representation of the first generation. The first 3 starters, Pikachu and Snorlax. The only weird choice is Espeon, but I guess it evolving from a Gen 1 Pokemon makes it okay. I do suppose his team could have better move pulls and held items, but I don't think he really needs it. Overall, good post-game. Essentially a stand-in for Gen 1's Safari Zone, we have the Bug Catching Contest. I'm not a fan. First of all, you can only enter it on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and only has 2 exclusive Pokémon. You could have made a couple more bug types exclusive to the contest. Maybe even some brand new ones. A negative I forgot to mention last time. Once your HP gets low enough, you start to hear this really annoying beeping, reminding you that your Pokémon is in a dire state. While I appreciate the reminder, it could have probably just been a little sound at the beginning of the turn. I feel like stone evolutions were not handled well in the early generations, as no Pokémon that evolves via stone will keep a big versatile move pool. Via level up, that is. They can still learn TMs and HMs, but still, if this applied to every Stone Evo, where if you wanted the better moves you'd have to keep them unevolved a little longer, I wouldn't have had a problem. However, 3 of these Pokémon were exempt from this, namely Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon. It makes sense why they did this. If Eevee learned all the moves of its evolutions, then you'd have Vaporeon's breathing fire, which it's not supposed to. Still though, I feel like if some Pokémon can be exempt from these rules, then why can't the rest of them be as well? By the way, in Gold and Silver, most of the stones aren't available until the post-game, which means a whopping 11 fully evolved Pokémon are unavailable before the post-game. Some of them did get new evolutions, but why have the remaining pre-evolutions be available pre-post-game if you can't evolve them? This was remedied a little in Crystal, where certain NPCs you defeat will give you their number and might want to give you a stone. I think having it be random and having to wait for them to call is lame, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. In the post-game, much like in Gen 1, a Snorlax will block your path, and you need to play a certain tune in order to wake it up. Unlike in Gen 1, you will instead use a radio with an added expansion card to wake Snorlax up. However, if you didn't get the radio card in the main game, you can't equip the expansion card, meaning you're gonna have to go all the way back to Goldenrod in order to get it. Is it my fault for not exploring enough of Goldenrod to get the card? Probably. Is it my fault that I've never needed the radio card throughout my adventure up until this point? Probably not. The type of an attacking move still determines whether or not it's a physical or special move, meaning that not all Pokémon get types that go well with their best attacking stat. Which is kinda worse now with there being even more Pokémon in Gen 2. Also, you still need another console, game, and a link cable in order to complete the Pokédex. This is of course because not all Pokémon are available to your version or playthrough. Now in Gen 2 though, it's actually even worse since you now also need a Gen 1 game in order to get the Pokémon exclusive to those games. I personally deem this as very stupid, as it means I either have to spend more money or can't complete the game by myself, especially years later when the necessary tech may not be as easily available. So much for gotta catch 'em all. I don't think the Pokémon Company should get rid of Pokémon available via trading, but I do feel like trade exclusive Pokémon should also be available by some other means as well. Perhaps via beating a tough challenge or finding an item in a difficult dungeon would work. Next up, I'll talk about some of the things that affect the difficulty of battles. It bears repeating, but just because a game isn't ball-crushingly hard doesn't make it an objective pile of doo-doo. However, being the type of gamer that I am, I would appreciate a higher level of difficulty that I feel like isn't fully there in Generation 2. Once again, the player has plenty of advantages over the other trainers, such as being able to use more items from your bag, some that the opponents never use, being able to be of much higher level, and being able to always have a full team of 6. In addition to that, the player is now also able to use held items on their Pokémon, while important trainers never put held items on their Pokémon. I would much rather enjoy the player and other trainers being on more equal footing, either via the player losing or important trainers gaining some of these privileges. Other things that could add more to the difficulty would be to have more randomized teams amongst opponents to decrease predictability, and more team advantages over the player, like your rival getting the superior starter to your own. Important trainers often specializing in just one type means that the player can usually just use one Pokémon with a super effective move and or resistant typing to very easily beat them. While the early game gym leaders can get a pass for this, I'd say like after Whitney, gym leaders and Elite Four members should have more versatile teams, perhaps centered around a specific theme or battle mechanic instead. Another issue I have is that while progressing through the game, the amount of Pokémon of gym leaders don't always increase. For example, after fighting the 4th gym leader, Morty, who has 4 Pokémon, the 5th gym leader can have either 3 or even just 2 Pokémon depending on who you fight. What? Another thing, you can fight Chuck, Jasmine, and Price in any order you want, but their teams don't change depending on the order you fight them. This means you could go from fighting level 27 to 30 Pokémon to 30 to 35, back down to 27 to 31. You could have just changed their levels depending on the amount of badges or something. This would mean that the levels of wild Pokémon would be weird, since I don't really think you could scale their levels too with this solution. Instead, I suggest that the Pokémon exclusive to Chuck and Price's directions be available either before the 4th and or after the 7th gym badge. Still though, how would I change the previous problems regarding the teams of gym leaders and Elite Four members? Well, Morty's team would have a theme centered around ghosts and yokai Pokémon, Chuck would have one centered around looking strong, Jasmine's team will be in reference to her once being a rock-type trainer, her relation to Amphi, and to the fact that she lives in a harbor. Price's team will still be cold, but will also reference where he lives. These 3 would also have their levels and Pokémon change depending on your badge count. Last for the gym leaders, Clara gets some dragony Pokemon that are less weak to ice. As for the Elite Four, I really want to have trainers who take advantage of weather, so I'm actually gonna get rid of 3 and replace them with a Rain Specialist, Sun Specialist, and Brock, who will specialize in Sandstorm. As to who will stay, I choose Karen. I need someone that can handle Dark and Ghost type moves, and I like her message about using your favorites, although her Pokemon's move pulls could probably be improved. You may have noticed that the later trainers' levels increased as a result of the level scaling for these 3. This means that the levels of trainers and wild Pokemon in areas after Mahogany Town should go up as well. Exclusive Pokemon is once again the only real difference. You'd think with more Pokemon added there would be more exclusive Pokemon to each version, but nope! There's actually less exclusive Pokemon for Gold and Silver than for Red and Blue. Once again, I don't think having 2 versions is justified enough. But what about the box legendaries, I hear you say? Well, sorry to tell you, but they basically have no influence over the plot, aren't mandatory, and both are found in each other's games, so I still fail to see why there needed to be 2 versions. If version differences are to be minimal, then I still believe that there should only be 1 version. This version would have more choice and trade evolved Pokemon, but both groups would also be available in some other challenging way. This means that you could still have trading, whilst also making it possible to complete the game by yourself. Crystal did add some good things, don't get me wrong. A playable female character was good for inclusivity, adding elemental stones before the post-game was good for Pokemon availability, and the sprite animations were neat. But 2 of them should have been there from the start, and the last one doesn't really change the game all that much. The Battle Tower, though good for the post-game, I don't find personally appealing, since it doesn't really have an end goal to it, but that's just me.
Where'd all the snow go? To summarize my opinions, I think the music is on the same good level as the generation before, and the graphics got an upgrade. I didn't really like the new rival as much as Blue, and I think the idea for his arc in Pokemon could have been executed better. But still, I think he was decent. Team Rocket and Crystal's Eusine I also think could have been better, as I wish their teams and place in the story were done better. Regarding the Pokemon themselves, I like most of them, but feel like some of them had disappointing designs and, in case of Unknown, untapped potential. Compared to Kanto, I don't really think Johto stands out all that much in terms of its routes and its settlements. There were of course some interesting places, like for example Ecruteak City. The second generation also brought some new fun gameplay additions and improvements that I appreciate, such as a better inventory, the weather moves, time, the splitting of the special stat, held items, move descriptions, optional tutorials, the move deleter, steel and dark types, and a bigger post-game. I do think some additions and returning flaws could have been fixed, like the bug catching contest, the low health beeping, my problems around stone evolutions, physical and special moves depending on type, and the fact that you can't catch every Pokemon by yourself. Regarding the difficulty, being the type of gamer that I am, I wish the game was a little more difficult, as I feel like you have a lot of advantages over the other trainers, whose teams I wish were more versatile and challenging. Lastly, regarding version differences, I still feel like Gold and Silver lacks enough reasons to warrant being different versions, and Crystal didn't add and improve enough from Gold and Silver to me to feel like it was needed. But it did still add some good things, that I will not deny. Despite all of that, though, I still had a good time. I'm giving all Gen 2 games a grade of 8 out of 10. Grades might change later. Thank you for watching this review. I hope it was better than the first one. I don't know when the next one will come out, but it will come out. That's a promise. Not like anyone watches these, but hey, it's good to set up goals. Bye. Nintendo issued an apology where they claimed that the developers were let the games to be post.
There are other aspects of where there's a 1 in 8,000 who has 4 Pokemon. The fifth